Hello, 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 everyone. Dr. Rowena Winkler here, and I am so excited to be speaking about this topic that I personally have been contending with for the past couple of months, and it pertains to sisterhood. And not the sisterhood in terms of our blood relations, but sisterhood in terms of the women that we surround ourselves with that lift us up and that inspire us to be better personally and professionally. And so, before I talk about sisterhood and how that ties into the sister wound in particular, I just wanted to share a little bit about what led me to this topic and why I felt called to share it with all of you. So, as I mentioned, I'm Dr. Rowena Winkler, and for the longest time, I didn't really have many close girlfriends. I was one of those gals that hung out with a lot of boys. And it wasn't just because I was totally boy crazy, though that's definitely true. But it wasn't until adulthood that I found a group of really close girlfriends. So, a couple of events that happened during my adolescence into my adulthood. In the sixth grade, I started getting a crush on this boy, and it actually came in between me and my best friend at the time because I was sending him notes about how I wanted to kiss him and whatnot. And we got in trouble with our teacher and ultimately the principal. And so after that moment, my relationship with that friend was never again the same. And then in high school, I started dating my boyfriend at the time, and that came in between another friend of mine. And after I eventually broke up with that guy, same thing. I ended up losing my best friend. I actually went through a mental health breakdown my freshman year of college, and I was unable to maintain that friendship. I felt very alone and that I couldn't turn to these young women that I had grown so close to when I was in high school. And then fast forward into my first job, I thought I was doing well. I felt really good about it until I quote unquote got mean girled by a group of women who didn't want to collaborate with me. I suspect there may have been aspects of jealousy in the mix, and I felt very much outside of this group of women that I was working with. So I'm sure that you may have your own experiences of how a man or a situation or maybe even an achievement on your end can get in the way of truly connecting with women. And upon reflecting on these experiences, I dove into what is called wound work. And according to Jane Eby, wound work contends with one of the three Trinity wounds. There is the mother wound, which I'm sure a lot of us can relate to in regards to how we communicate and perhaps are triggered by and hurt by our mothers. There is something called the witch wound, which ties into how we're unable to step into our true embodiment and power as women. And then, as I mentioned, I'm going to be talking about the sister wound. And according to Sabrina Lynn, who has this beautiful community of women called Rewilding, the sister wound is basically a manifestation of how we live in this patriarchal society. We live in a world where it's dominated by men, and let's be honest, dominated by white men. And because of this, we have become conditioned to have unhealthy coping mechanisms in order to survive. So at the start of this, this was a survival mechanism, but it's now since manifested as this 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 way for us as women to deal with the pain and the grief of what has happened to us in a patriarchal society by pitting ourselves against each other. And so, because this spans generations and this has been passed down from generation to generation, these unhealthy coping mechanisms have been imprinted in us. So, it's intergenerational. Our mothers and our grandmothers and our great grandmothers and our great great grandmothers and so on have passed this down. It's ancestral. And if you're into this as well, there may be even some past life component related to this. Now, you're probably wondering, okay, Dr. Rowena, this seems a little esoteric up there, woo woo. But let me bring it down to you in regards to how this sister wound can show up in your personal and professional life. So, according to Alexis Sabatino, there are ways that we can see this sister wound come up. And I know for sure when I went through this list and heard about this list, light bulbs were going off like, oh my goodness, yes, I definitely do this. So, when we as women come together collectively, whether in friendship, relationship, as acquaintances, or in work, we may experience the following, which triggers or brings up that sister wound. The first is this need for belonging. So we may feel incensed to go toward rejection and exile. There may be we may be motivated to want to push people out because we want to belong ourselves, right? So there may be instances where, as I mentioned, I was mean girled by this group of women at work, and I had this sense of rejection, that I was triggered and felt like that I didn't belong in this group, which is why these women didn't include me in the work that they were doing, even though I was demonstrating that I was just as, if not a better contributor than the rest of them. Another idea regarding the sister wound is betrayal and deception. So, you may come across instances where you feel that you are betrayed by the women that may have felt like they were your friend, right? This is where the inauthenticity comes in. This is where that fakeness comes in. I'm sure you've met women who felt a need to be really kind to you, to your face, but then are talking about you behind your back. And tied to that, right? This notion of not feeling safe to be authentic. In my work as a coach, I work with women in regards to bringing out their authenticity, to feel empowered and confident, to be able to step into their authentic nature, their authentic selves without feeling the need to play it small. But because of the sister wound, we are coming in and showing up with this inauthenticity, that we have to show up as a different version of ourselves with this mask on in order to be accepted. And then the other piece, oh my goodness, especially for my friends out there who are fellow business owners and entrepreneurs, the comparison. Comparisonitis is definitely a result of this sister wounding, where we feel like we have to compare and judge each other in order to feel better about ourselves. But you know what that does? It allows the patriarchy, it allows other folks, men, white men, these powerful, power structures to come in, swoop in, and do what they've been doing for years and years and years, because we're so busy and we're so distracted pitting ourselves and comparing ourselves against each other. One of my really good friends talks about this in regards to, we can't compare our chapter 1 to our chapter 30. We can't look at someone else and say, "Oh my gosh, their life is so perfect. They have all of these things," because we don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I got to tell you, my friends, you know this, even if you seemingly have everything you desire, the imposter syndrome is still so, so real. And it's so subversive. And it comes in when we're not expecting it. And lastly, Alexis Sabatino talks about, in regards to the sister wound, this not enoughness. I know for me personally, this not enoughness is, as my spiritual coach has said to me, it's a reoccurring track, like it's a soundtrack. It's just an endless loop of the not enoughness. We operate with this notion, this this attitude, this approach of scarcity. And so, because we feel like we're not enough, because we feel like that we are lacking, because we don't embrace the abundance and have gratitude for what we already have, we're in competition with each other. We feel that there's not enough abundance, there's not enough jobs, there's not enough men, there's not enough whatever, XYZ, insert what you'd like here, that we have to compete with other women. And we've seen this, right? We've seen this at work, we've seen this on social media, the cattiness, the pettiness, the really unkind words. But here's the thing, with all of this, there is enough for all of us. And what the sister wound does, it gets in the way of us showing up as our authentic selves and stepping into our power and focusing on the gratitude and creating that abundance, right? Because the sister wound and all those things that I mentioned that get in the way, they prevent us from stepping into our own lightness because we're dimming each other out. It's essentially a self-sabotage mechanism. And quite frankly, it's hating on the feminine. Look, I completely understand. I am a woman who, for years, have operated with this hyper masculine energy, right? Where I was go, 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 go. I was checking off the boxes. I was, I was very self motivated, and I got things done. But at what cost? And it was through doing this wound work, and in particular, this sister wound work, where I realized I was shutting out my divine feminine energy. And I was dimming that part of me, that light, that, as I'm sure many of you know, when we think about the divine feminine, it's about this softness, it's about nurturing, it's about creation, especially for my fellow mamas out there. I mean, have you ever sat back and thought about that we literally can create life? That is our power. And through the sister wound mechanism, we're unable to do that in a way that is true to us, and in a way that is empowering, and in a way that doesn't allow distractions and judgment to get in the way. Sabrina Lynn also talks about how it enables us to reject goddess energy. Listen, y'all, we've had those moments where we feel like a goddess. And so by shutting other women out and pitting ourselves against other women and creating competition and creating these notions of unbelonging and exile and rejection and scarcity, we're not tapping into that divine goddess energy that is in there. Like you and I, we have so much potential, but we let these things get in the way of that. And so I hope, if anything, y'all walk away with understanding that it may even seem minor, it may seem like petty, but it really is distracting us from the amazing value that we can bring to this world with the work that we do. And something that I also want to bring up, because listen, y'all, I'm not coming in here, I'm not preaching saying that I've got it all figured out and that I'm no longer dealing with these things. I also find myself stepping into moments where I have a judgy moment, or there's feelings of jealousy, because that's huge too. And in a little bit, I'll talk about tools and ways that we can bring that awareness up, and how we can work toward healing that sister wound. But something that I'm sure many of you have heard about or heard of is when we walk in or step in, and perhaps we have a judgy moment or a thought, or let's take it to the extreme. Let's say that there's a woman at work or in your friend circle, or part of the acquaintances. Maybe it's the wife of your partner's friend. Who knows? Maybe you hate that person, right? Maybe you're like, oh, I can't stand her. Oh, she bothers me. Have you ever taken a moment to sit and reflect on why you may hate that person? Why that person annoys you? Why this thing that they did triggered you? Because oftentimes that thing that we dislike or are annoyed by is something that maybe we dislike about ourselves. Maybe it's something that we wish we had but didn't. Maybe it's something that reminds us of our mom. Who knows, right? The possibilities are endless. But I would invite you that when a judgy thought comes up, or we're super angered by what something did, not to say that people don't do things that cause us to be angry. I'm not saying that at all. We're human, right? We make mistakes. We're imperfect. But if there's someone that's really getting under your skin, someone that's doing things that really grind your gears, right? Thinking about it and saying, what's the root of this? Does this bring up something that I wish I had? Does this bring up something that triggers me due to a childhood thing? Does this bring up my feelings of not enoughness, which is often what happens with me? So think through that, because what ends up happening is these things make us feel like we can't be our authentic selves. And so by doing this work, we're able to reflect on and feel more empowered to step in and own it, right? There's a quote that I say all the time that it it's a bit of a rework or a tweak from Ben Platt, who won the Tony Award for the musical Dear Evan Hansen. And the quote is this: "What makes you different makes you powerful. What makes you different makes you powerful." So when women shut you out, or you feel like you've had a falling out with a girlfriend, or you feel like you can't be friends with women, like I shared at the beginning of this talk, just understand that those differences or those reasons that made you feel alone or made you feel like you didn't belong are the very same things that attract the right people to you. I found this in my own life and my own business. It was when I finally felt comfortable and safe and confident to step into my authentic self and to show up as the real me, that I was all of a sudden magnetizing clients or friends or communities, such as this one, right? That align with who I not only am showing up to be, but who I want to be. Because the fact of the matter is, who you surround yourself with plays such a role in how you're showing up in the world. And again, I'm such if you follow me on Instagram, and I'll give you my information at the end of this. I am so big on authenticity. Authenticity. I work with women on authenticity. I call myself a women's authenticity coach, right? It's huge because, as I mentioned, things come up where we play it small and don't show up as ourselves. And I was I was attending another conference, a virtual conference last week, and one of the speakers, it was a marketing conference, so it was very fun. One of the speakers was the amazing award-winning actress Viola Davis. And something that she said that really resonated with me and something that I want to bring forward to you all is that we don't show up authentically because we're afraid of judgment, right? That we're afraid, we have this fear of being authentic because of that judgment. And that judgment stems from deep rooted feelings of shame, which I know my favorite, Dr. Brene Brown, talks about a lot. And with that shame comes isolation. And we don't want that. We are social creatures by nature. We are meant to be in community with each other. And so, as I mentioned, this whole sister wound work brings us back to how we started, before we got into where we are now with technology and capitalism and what have you. Women, we were tribes. We helped each other out. There was a village. When a woman was having a baby, all the other women came to help out. And believe you and me, as someone who gave birth to my daughter literally days before lockdown and COVID-19, the part of my soul missed that so deeply. Like, not being able to have my village, my tribe to help me figure out how to keep this baby, this human alive. Goodness, I think that I was feeling that. That's who we are at our core. And so we don't want to be isolated. We shouldn't have to feel surrounded by shame. We shouldn't have to feel that we are going to be judged just by showing up who we are. And if anything else, right? What my thesis is, what I'm hoping you gather from this talk is that the sister wound and this conditioning, this programming we received is that's the result, right? And so, okay, how can we heal? I want to talk through some ways that we can heal this wounding and do the work so that we can get to a place of authenticity and community and amazingness that I know we all have the ability to step into. And I'm going to talk about it at different levels, right? So at the individual level, so this is not even involving anyone else, including myself. Healing the sister wound starts with yourself at the individual level. And I already alluded to ways that you can do this, right? Some techniques and tools. But to be more specific, right? It's exploring and getting curious when things come up. I already gave examples, right? You're jealous of that woman, perhaps seated next to you at the rooted retreat. What's that about? Are you getting angry when so and so lady sends you an email? What's that about? Oftentimes these things feel seemingly surface level, but there's, as I mentioned, a deeper rooted cause. So get curious, right? Observe. Put on your researcher hat, right? I give you permission to do that and just sit and think about what that's about and really question the root of those thoughts. When I've started doing that work myself, man, oh man, it really went back to that not enoughness, which stemmed from some experiences in childhood, which is wild to believe, right? That the way we treat each other as women could stem from how we were raised. What was your mother's relationships with other women like? Golly, I think about that so much as a mom now, right? I have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and I think about, oh man, she's watching. She's observing a lot of my moves, right? So I gotta show how I'm role modeling. And again, I'm not perfect, but having that awareness is so key. Because if we walk around half asleep and aren't aware of it, we can't heal it and change it. So that's at the individual level. Then if we move to the interpersonal level, right? When it comes to our relationships, our friendships, our partnerships, even in business, our clients, if you see something come up, like if you see a friend doing something that maybe, use the list that I shared today, maybe, for example, comparison or something, I don't know. One of the things that I've mentioned today. Call it out in loving honesty. Don't be afraid. A phrase that a friend of mine and I have used is, I know this is not your intention, but dot dot dot. You said this thing and it caused me to feel this way, right? Gottman is a relationship therapist, does does work when it comes to usually romantic relationships, but I feel that this exercise can pour into other types of relationship. Do the I feel, not you did, right? You said this and you suck because of this. Bring it back to how, again, I know this wasn't your intention, but when you said this, it caused me to feel this and here's why. Open that dialogue, right? Listen, I'm very conflict avoidant because I was role modeled that as a child. But again, that's another story. But having these communication devices is so helpful. Another way that you can help heal the sister wound interpersonally with the folks that you dialogue with is by educating them. So maybe the conversation could be, I know that this was not your intention, but I listened to this speaker at the Rooted Retreat, and she mentioned that, this thing called the sister wound may cause feelings of competition and scarcity. And I don't want that between us. And I feel that when you said that, it brought up these things, and here is why. Does that make sense? I hope it does. And feel free to ask questions and connect if that doesn't make sense. But yeah, educate, share what you learned today. Let's spread the word. Again, you know, my whole mission, the why behind the work that I do as a coach is to bring some of these more esoteric spiritual things to folks so that it's practical and tangible, right? So at the community level, okay, let's talk about community. I already mentioned it. At our root, we lived in tribes. We had our community. So find your tribe. I mean, look around you at the event here. I feel like this is a great group to start, you know? So find your community. Surround yourself with women in integrity. Surround yourself with the women who understand the work that you're doing. I've said this before when it comes to my work. Sometimes when we start letting go and letting the things that don't matter or the distractions fall away, sometimes people in our lives don't quite get it and they may see you differently and they may not be a fan of it. And that's okay, right? That's okay. Find women who do. Find women who are also doing the work. Find women who are just as willing to hold up the mirror and, as I said, call things out in loving honesty. And then another piece of it is find ways to come together consistently. Like the Rooted Retreat, right? We're here coming every year to this event. So don't let that fall away. Just recently with a group of girlfriends, we started a book club. And the first book had a very interesting mother lens, right? So find ways to get together on a consistent basis, monthly, quarterly, every holiday season, because that allows to continue to heal that wounding. Okay. So that's community level. And then lastly at the societal level, right? So this is right, big picture. I've made several references to this already, and because it's very important to me. But for those of you who are fellow mamas, teach the younger generation, right? Your children. Break those generational chains. Just because maybe our moms did not have strong relationships or friendships with other women or they weren't healthy, doesn't mean that you can't role model boundaries to your children or show your children emotion or explain to your children why, maybe your feelings of disliking so and so friend come from this, right? Being open to have these conversations so that with each generation we're getting better and better and better and we're healing and healing and healing. I remember when back in 2019 when I found out that I was having a little girl. I'm not gonna lie, y'all, I freaked out a bit. I was like, "Oh, no." I thought I was having a little boy for the longest time. I think because intuitively I knew, I was like, "Oh, no, like, this is gonna be some intense healing as a mom, and things are gonna come up," and they did. They did. Things came up, reflecting on my own experiences with my own mom and my own, as I mentioned, I didn't have a lot of close female friends for a long time. I do now, and I'm very thankful, right? So yeah, do that. Talk to your kids, find resources. They're out there. And if you need help, let me know. And then how we continue to build this legacy of healing and building a legacy of women lifting each other up and not cutting each other down is to create content. The internet never forgets. So, I mean, to be fair, it doesn't necessarily have to be posted, but if you're a content creator, Maybe it's going live and speaking to what you've learned here. Maybe it's creating an Instagram post. Maybe it's talking about this similar to what I'm doing here at an event. Maybe it's singing a song that makes you think of the feelings you had as a teenager when you were pitted against another young woman, right? The fact of the matter is not a lot of people know, like, this event is unlike other events, and it's because we're tapping into these topics of wellness and holistic wellness and spiritual wellness. These things are not super mainstream. I think we're getting there. I think we're moving there. I think with COVID-19, especially, as my therapist and I called it, the collective retreat, right? We hunkered down and we were sitting with ourselves and didn't really know what to do. So we're starting to wake up, right? We're starting to have more consciousness about these things, but more work can be done. I mean, as for me, I just started diving deep into this wound work the this past year. And there's always something that you can learn, always something that you can teach. You as women, you have the tools, you have the wisdom, you have the expertise. As I mentioned, we are creators at our core. And so it's time for us to no longer be afraid, no longer be shy, no longer play into the sister wounding that has been passed generations and generations and generations. It's time to step up, speak out, teach, share, collect mentors, find community. And so the last bit I wanted to share is speaking of community. And as I mentioned, this community is fabulous. But if you're looking for another type of community, I wanted to share with you something that I launched just this summer. So it's brand new. It's very near and dear to my heart, and it's called the Inner Muse membership. Now, I mentioned that I call myself a women's authenticity coach. But another title, because what are titles? Like whatever. I'm gonna make this is the title I get. It's the Inner Muse mentor. What does that mean? The Inner Muse, the way that I explain the Inner Muse is that it's that goddess energy. It's the voice in deep inside that tells us intuitively, because again, as women, we are so intuitive. We're so intuitive. It's that voice saying, excuse me, are you should be doing this? But because we're so distracted by things like the sister wound, by things like hustle culture, by things like the patriarchy, by things like working 9 to 5 and capitalism and all these things. Insert the distractions here. Or perfectionism, golly, that's a huge one. Homegirl gets dim. So something that I do with my work and with my clients is, how can we dig deep and stop feeling like we have to check off boxes and stop feeling like we need external validation to do the things we know are right, and tap in to that inner muse because she knows what's right for you. That's the story here. That if we allow the sister wound to heal and we embrace our sisterhood, we really can start tapping into that inner muse. And so my membership is structured for us to move through that. And there's 3 areas. There's communication practice, because y'all, my PhD is in communication. And if there are things like public speaking or intuitive copywriting, right? I approach marketing and sales and communication and PR and all the things through an intuitive lens, right? there are things as best practices, right? Of course, best practices are helpful, but if it doesn't align with how you want to show up, it's just not, it's going to fall flat. It's not going to be authentic. So that's communication practice. And then I have the confidence building, which is my work in astrology and human design and tarot, tools like this, wound work, to help you build your confidence so that you can confidently embody and show up as the amazing woman that you are. And then the last piece is career preparation, because as a professor and now as a coach, I have helped many folks tweak their job market materials to show up in a way that not only allows them to present their best selves, but enables them to find the discernment to find the employer that aligns with them. Because not only are we applying for jobs, it has to be a good fit with the company we're applying for. I'm sure there are folks out there that have stepped into toxic work cultures. It's not cute. It's not fun. It speak about trigger, right? It brings up all these feelings. So, with my job market preparation, we go through resume, interview. I actually building a workshop on vocalizing your worth because you are worthy. So those are the three areas. And in the membership, every month, we have a full moon practice and a new moon practice that involves a card pull and conversation about what the full moon means and what that particular astrological sign means in the context of the full moon. So at the time of this recording, we just had the full moon in Pisces. Your girl here is a Pisces. I'm very much in my feels. And so the conversation, right, about Pisces are very creative, very spiritual, intuitive. So beautiful timing that I'm giving this talk, right? So celebrating those wins of how we were able to create and tap into that intuition. So there's that. And then I teach a master class every month in those three areas. So if this is something that feels in alignment for you, if this is something that you're interested to learn more about, you can find me on all the social media, RB Winkler, Ph.D. So Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn. YouTube is not RB Winkler, Ph.D., but I'm sure you can find my YouTube channel based on all of those. And I would love to have a conversation. As I think I mentioned this at the start of the talk, this is the first time I've collected my thoughts around this and presented it to an audience. So I would love to receive your feedback, your questions about how we can continue doing this work. What does this work mean in my particular context? How can I continue doing those practices that I mentioned? I would love to hear all of it. And I welcome all of it because, again, it is through continuing to speak of this work and leaning into our sisters and building sisterhood that, man, oh man, oh man, who knows what power and potential and impact, because that's the thing, right? And listen, I'm not saying you have to go off and be like Oprah, though wouldn't many of us love to go out and be like Oprah? It can be in those small day-to-day ways, right? I mentioned doing this with our kiddos, doing this work with our friends. It can honestly, as I mentioned, be on the individual level. You could celebrate a win of healing this work just by reframing your mindset. Dr. Rowena loves a good hashtag Rowena reframe. Like, how can we reframe these seemingly icky feelings that come up and alchemize and transmute it in a way that is impactful and powerful and productive? Because that's what I'm all about. I'm all about efficiency. I'm originally from New Jersey, after all. So how can we be, more efficient here? And this work allows us to, because again, we're not bogged down and distracted by the programming and the conditioning and all the things that disempower us and don't enable us to be our most authentic selves, right? Golly, I mean, again, I'm still doing the work, but just in the work this year alone, I'm I can be an example, a role model to you about embracing what makes me different makes me powerful. What makes you different makes you powerful. And as women, we shouldn't have to disempower each other anymore. We should lift each other up. We we have the ability to help each other, to support each other, to acknowledge each other, to respect each other. That's just the that's something that I hope that I can impart on you all today. Once again, I'm Dr. Rowena Winkler. I am so excited and delighted and honored to share my thoughts about this concept. Again, would love to hear comments, questions, next steps. How can we continue doing this work? Because as we've seen with this community, and as I'm sure you've seen in communities that you may have, once we all come together in community as women, whew, the possibilities are endless. We have unlimited, untapped potential and power. That inner muse, she is inside of each and every one of us. And now is the time to bring homegirl and voice your dreams and desires because you are so worthy of that. You are so deserving of that. And collectively, we can empower and help each other out and change the freaking world. I didn't want my jersey to come out there, and you know what I'm saying? So I think with that, I'm feeling complete. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate being a part of this wonderful community and event. And I look forward to further connecting with you. Thanks so much and take care. Bye.